Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to be offering tips on how to spot a really good quality belt. I'm Anesu Sagonda and I produce educational luxury content for anyone after the finer things, whether you're new to money and wanting to learn how to navigate the terrain, or you're into luxury but you want to focus more on high quality, under the radar brands, or you're young and starting out in life and wanting to reap the benefits of buying better quality from the get-go, then my content is geared towards you. There are a couple of comments that motivated this video, but I won't address those comments in this video. What I will do is talk about them in a separate video together, and I'll also include in there other aspirational brands, for example, for illustrative purposes. But what I'll do in this video is I will focus on offering tips if you decide to go, for example, down the retail route, where you go to a brand that's high quality, under the radar, and you're buying a belt. What should you consider? What should you look at? What should you pay attention to? Or if you decide to go down the route of an artisan getting a belt made, for example, what kind of questions should you ask? There are about 5 or 6 components to consider when it comes to a belt. The leather on the outside, the lining on the inside, you have the holes on the belt, you have the edge coating, how the belt is stitched together, you have the hardware. What's really important is not those individual components, but how those components are assembled, how they're bought together. That's the most important thing, and that is what makes the difference between belt and a very good belt with mileage. What I'll do is offer tips based on those individual components and what you should really be considering. Leather is the main and the biggest component when it comes to a belt. There are a number of countries in the world that are focused on processing leather. Bottom end of the market, a lot more fast fashion, mass market focused. You have countries like India, China, Brazil, Russia, South Korea, for example. And then above them, in the mid-range, mid-tier, in the middle, you have countries that are focused on producing leathers that are mid, going right up to the top end, high quality leathers. Think of countries such as the United Kingdom, Argentina, Portugal, Spain, Italy, for example. And then top end of the market, you have the French. The French are known for processing the creme de la creme when it comes to the leathers, the very best quality leathers within the leather goods space. What I'd be inclined to recommend is a leather at the very minimum from the mid-range, the mid-section at the very minimum. And what I'd be more inclined to recommend is if you're choosing a tannery from one of those countries, for example, either go with their top range or a tannery focused on producing top-end leathers. Ideally, I would always recommend a French tannery and go specifically for leather that's full grain. It's leather in its natural state and leather that has been vegetal tanned. I'm going to attach above a Joseph Duclos video talking about heritage, harmony leather, the difference between chrome and vegetal tanning. So even if you don't go for a leather from a French tannery, but you go for a leather, for example, from Spain or Italy or Argentina, please ensure it's full grain, it's a natural leather, and it's vegetal tanned. What you should also consider, especially if it's a ready-made, a ready-to-wear belt, is a belt that's just one solid piece of leather. It's not multiple pieces of leather that have been joined together. What you'll typically find in a situation like that is it's leather of poorer, varying qualities that they've cobbled together after they've finished making something else, and it's the bits that are left over. Whereas if it's one solid piece, the brand have been a lot more deliberate about using a better or good or high quality leather. I'm going to use belts from 2 French brands to illustrate some of my points. The 2 brands are on opposite spectrums when it comes to luxury, and I like the fact that they're offering fantastic quality at different price points. The first brand, very confidently upholding the mid-tier, is Guibert Paris, a brand I have recently spoken about. I'm going to attach the first video above. And Guibert Paris is a brand I went to see a few months ago, went to see specifically their handbags, and I noticed their belts and thought the next time I'm in Paris, I'm going to go back specifically for the belts. I really liked what I saw and I wanted to buy one, and when I went back, I ended up acquiring one of their belts. They are fantastically in the mid-tier. Their belts typically are priced around the 250, 280, 300 euro mark, depending on the width and the length of the belt. And they use Novo Nappa leather. Novo Nappa is arguably the best, the creme de la creme when it comes to full grain, natural, smooth calfskin within the leather goods space. It's the same leather that's used by Hermes. They refer to it as Barenia, and Joseph Duclos refer to Novo Nappa as heritage in-house. It is an absolutely exceptional quality leather. It's going to patina wonderfully and darken over time and develop a very subtle sheen as the leather ages, but it's going to age incredibly well. It's heirloom quality. The second brand I'll be talking about is Duret Paris. My top end exhibits will be from Duret Paris. I've also recently spoken about them. I'm going to attach the video above. And Duret Paris is a custom focused brand. They're at the top end of the market, ultra high end. And they are focused on men's accessories, belts, wallets. That's how I discovered the brand. And their speciality is exotic leathers. Think, for example, alligator, crocodile, ostrich, snakeskin, shark, elephant, for example. But they do produce belts in calf skin, in goat skin, and also in lamb skin. Their belts are typically priced around the 600 euro mark for the calf skin, goat skin, lamb skin, for example. And as you can imagine, the exotic leathers typically are over 1,000 euros. So I'll be using belts from those two brands just to illustrate a lot of my points. They're brands I really like. As I mentioned, I own a belt from Guibert Paris, and I wouldn't hesitate to recommend these two brands at all. I really like everything about them, and they're upholding their levels of luxury incredibly well. When it comes to lining, I would still err on the same side as a high quality leather, the full grain, the natural leather that's on the front of the belt, and having something that's similar on the back end, on the lining. But what you'll find with the slightly cheaper, the more mid-range brands is they may use a leather that's just been very lightly processed, because it's going to encounter friction when you're wearing it, perspiration, for example, but something that's just been very lightly processed, so you're still maintaining the high quality of the leather. The custom focused, I'd be more inclined to say the same exceptional quality on the outside, on the inside, on the lining as well. And what you will find is that brands will layer, like Duret Paris have done, will layer the leather on the inside to give the belt volume. And they'll use the natural, same high quality leather. So you have the consistent high quality of leather on the outside as well as on the inside. But with the lower price point, where they have lower margins to work with, something that is just minimally processed. I'm going to attach above a Joseph Duclos video where I talk about the difference between heritage and harmony leather, for example, where it's just slightly processed, but it still maintains the high quality and performance and longevity of the leather. When it comes to the belt holes, ensure that the holes are perfectly centered on the belt and that there is even spacing between all of the holes on the belt. The other thing is, when you look down through the hole, make sure it's a clean, neat, even, consistent hole. It isn't a hole where there are any tears on the top or the bottom of the hole. And then turn the belt on the underside, and if you can, either use your light or go near a light fixture if you're buying a ready-made belt, and look to see if there are layers of leather or it's just a solid piece of leather. Whatever you see, ensure it is solid and it's not meshy, and it doesn't look like they're little flakes, that it's some sort of meshy, springy material they've used on the inside to add volume to the belt. Please ensure that it's just consistent layers, multiple layers, or it's just a solid piece of leather. The other thing as well I'd like to highlight, if you do have a situation where you'd like to add other belt holes after you have bought the belt and left the store, please take it back to the brand or ask the brand to recommend a cobbler or somebody who can add the additional holes. Please don't just go to a random place. It'll ruin your belt. They will not be able to get the same precision, neatness, cleanness, consistency of the hole with the tools that they would typically use. The brand will use better quality tools to puncture the holes. If you're looking at a belt that's top end of the market, custom made brand, what you should consider, and a lot of custom brands will do this, is they will burn the inside of the hole, or they will clean it. They will use some sort of, whether it's burning it or some sort of tool to just clean the inside, so it's a clean, neat consistency on the inside. And then they will coat it with wax. That will ensure that the hole expands, it's elastic, and it'll never tear. So even if you put on weight or put a lot of strain on the hole with the actual prong on the belt, it'll always stretch in a measured way and it won't tear the leather. It's almost as if you are waxing it, so you maintain the suppleness of the leather. When it comes to how the belt is sewn, how it's assembled, how it's put together, the type of stitching that the brand use is a deal breaker for me personally. And when I talk to a brand focused primarily on leather goods, and they produce accessories as well, complementing accessories, so wallets, belts, and so forth. When it comes to the belts, I'll always ask where they source their leathers. If it's a French tannery, it's automatically a big tick for me personally. And then the next question I'll always ask is, how is it sewn? If they say machine sewn, machine stitched, that is an automatic deal breaker. I will never recommend a belt that has been machine sewn, unless you are buying something that's just for a once-off occasion, it's a fashion belt, then that's your prerogative. But when the focus is longevity and heirloom quality belt, a belt that you will wear a lot day in, day out, month after month, year after year, and you want something that is going to be beautifully made and it's going to stand the test of time, then it has to be a belt that's saddle stitched. As mentioned in the first comment, the comments I mentioned at the beginning of the video that motivated this video, saddle stitching all the way. Saddle stitching is an incredibly high quality and durable form of stitching, and it's stronger than machine stitching. 2011, I bought a reversible belt from Hermes. So it's black one side, smooth leather, and chocolate brown on the other side, pressed grain pattern in chocolate brown. And I brought that purely pressure to rack up spend with Hermes. And it's a belt that is over 10 years old, but I haven't worn it that much. I haven't even worn it 30 times. I would say I've worn it between 20, 25 times. And it's a belt I hardly wear because I like things that are really understated, low-key. I feel embarrassed when I wear the H buckle because it's too show-offy for me. It's saying, look at what I'm wearing. I've spent a lot of money on a belt. But I bought it under pressure. And the majority of Hermes belts are machine sewn. I'm not aware of saddle stitched belts from Hermes. They may be there, I'm not saying they don't, but that's more on the custom focus of the brand. But the majority of their belts are machine sewn. And it's something I will never recommend because regardless of how well machine stitched a belt is, it's going to unravel over time. It's not going to stand the test of time, whether it's at the beginning where the buckle is or the tip, like what has happened with my Hermes belt. I'm not going to ever consider personally or recommend machine stitched. And then when I look at the leather, the Hermes leather, I like the leather, the smooth, the textured leather on the underside. I like the quality. And the inside, what they have placed on the inside, it's a fairly cheap, almost like papery feeling leather. I don't even know if it's actually leather, but it has unraveled and it just shows machine stitching doesn't stand the test of time. Focus on belts that are saddle stitched. I know Hermes are aware that the stitching hasn't always been good, it's problematic, and it's something I think they may have addressed. So possibly future belts are better, but it's something that I'm not going to to test. But what I recommend is the saddle stitching. Saddle stitching originally was just done on saddles. It's a type of stitching, as I've mentioned, that's incredibly durable. You need a stitching that's durable, that's consistent, that's going to stand the test of time, especially when it comes to saddles. You have no margin for error. If the stitching suddenly tears, it rips apart when the rider is on the horse, they can fall and get injured or even killed. So it's an incredibly durable, robust type of stitching that's better than machine stitching, and that is what I'll always recommend. The second thing that goes with the saddle stitching is the type of thread that they use. Lower end of the market, you will find brands will use either polyester, nylon, cotton, or a blend of those. And some will give you the option to go with linen. What I always recommend is linen thread with the saddle stitching with high quality leathers. Keep it all natural. And on top of that, find out, particularly as you go up the levels of luxury, you will find brands will strengthen the linen. What they will do is they'll run it through wax. That'll strengthen it, it'll smooth out the thread, and it'll also give it a waterproof element. So those are some of the things that I would highlight. Saddle stitched, if you have the option to go for linen all the way, and then top end, you will find you have the option, you'll find out they wax it, they really pay attention to the details, going that extra mile, then go for the waxed linen that's used to administer the saddle stitch. And the saddle stitch is done by hand. It's sometimes referred to as hand stitching or 2-needle stitching. But I am going to talk about saddle stitching, machine stitching, angle stitching, stitching within the leather goods space later on in the year, because there are a lot of misconceptions out there about how good something is, who hand stitches, what is hand stitched, where it's possible. A fuller conversation I'd really like to have. So if that's something important, please do subscribe so you don't miss out. Personally, I think edge coating is a must. I have come across brands that do not edge coat their edges, and they've said to me, we think the quality of the leather is absolutely fantastic and we have done the stitching right at the edge, so that also helps to protect the edges. But I'm just not convinced. But I guess they are confident in their products because they're small brands and they can't afford to have a lot of mistakes. Their margin for error is incredibly low. But what I recommend is edges that are protected, and a brand that is really focused on the details. So it's hand applied, it's thinly, neatly, evenly, beautifully applied, and you don't have any of the edge coating running over or it's lumpy in parts. It's just beautifully applied. What brands will typically do is they'll sand down the edges so you have a very neat, even, consistent surface, and then they'll apply the first layer, leave it to dry, the second, leave it to dry, and then the third, and then the edges are beautifully protected. Different brands use different products. For example, wonderful Italian brand I really like, Filextra. They are known for their black lacquered edge coating. I don't know what's in the coating. I've asked them, they said it's our own special ingredients, which I would expect. They don't have to divulge the information, but the quality is fantastic of their black lacquered edge coating. All of the products I've ever seen, I've never seen split or torn edge coating from Filextra. It is literally bulletproof. I have one of their bags and I remember inspecting the black lacquered edge coating throughout the bag, and I just thought, wow, this is beautiful. And even when you feel it and you rub it, it's an incredibly well applied, robust product. The thing that really stands out is when brands say they add beeswax to their edge coating. Beeswax is a fantastic product when it comes to durability. It'll beautifully seal your edges in terms of just the look, but also the durability it adds to the edges. That's just something I found over time, that the top brands I've spoken to, they all add beeswax to the ultimate product, the end product, the edge coating that they apply. And then you have, for example, Duret Paris, who use a mixture of paraffin and also beeswax to beautifully edge coat their edges. And finally, the hardware. At an absolute minimum, go for hardware that is solid brass. You will feel the weight in the product. With certain brands, they will clearly state, for example, at the back of the Guibert Paris belt, solid brass made in Italy. If it doesn't say, ask the brand, ask the atelier, but you'll be able to tell from the weight, and it has to be solid brass. And brass is great in terms of it attaches the best to the substance that is used to plate the hardware. Also worth noting, particularly if you're going to go for hardware from a top-end brand and it's expensive jewelry quality hardware, make sure first of all it's weighted, but also check to see the thickness of the plating, the microns, what's referred to the microns, something between 1.5 to 3 microns, particularly if it's an expensive belt. It has a fairly ornate buckle on the front. Then you want to be sure that firstly it's weighted, it's brass, and that the plating is thick enough to stand the test of time. But as always, to avoid tarnishing, use the belt. Those are my tips when it comes to sourcing a really good quality belt, an heirloom quality belt. Any thoughts, any questions, as always, let me know in the comments down below.